for the reason that we're here, and we hope that everybody else in the prison system is outside of that prison system so they don't need us anymore. That would be a great goal. This is a good thing. And thank y'all for speaking. We really appreciate it. Now, I did get one complaint that I didn't tell enough jokes. Somebody wants, I don't know, I think she wants to just steal my jokes. Maybe someplace else. But I'll tell one real fast. You know what happened when Osama bin Laden died? Did you hear about that? And he went right up to heaven. I got up to paradise. St. Peter said, look, we've been expecting you. I want to show you around myself. So he starts taking a tour. Comes up on George Washington. And he said, I'm the father of the United States. How dare you attack my country? Beast. Goes a little further. Meets Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson said, I wrote the documents of freedom for my country. How dare you attack us? Beat him again. Went further, met James Madison. Madison said, I protected my country from an attack on our shores by the British. How dare you attack us in our country? Beats him again. Old Osama sang, St. Peter, I thought this was paradise. What's wrong? So, oh, it's paradise, all right. And every day, you're going to get 70 more Virginians. Gotta read that fine print. That's terrible. So, something I'd like to address this afternoon is that we're blessed to be called to this ministry and into the other ministries where we get to serve Christ and His people. Blessed. And one of the most important things we bring to any ministry that we do is our own experience of Jesus Christ. That's number one. This is a key experience of our own lives. That's why we're here. That's why we're at this conference. And why we do any of the other service that we do. It's extremely important. And this is the most important background that we bring into prison and other ministry that we do. And of course, any one of us, and y'all gave your testimony, but people here giving their testimony in the variety of situations, including in the prisons. And it includes so many different kinds of experiences of Christ. He meets us in so many different ways. But what I'd like to do is sort of pull together a way to look at the whole of our experience of Christ. I start off with the fact, and again, these testimonies, but also our own personal lives can witness to the fact that we are fallen human beings. And it is key for human beings to take good things and try to use them self-centeredly, to use them selfishly, usually based on our own feelings, and then distort them. And because we take good things, I mean, everything God made is good, inherently good. Sexuality is a good. Alcohol is a good. Various drugs are good. They have a wide variety of good purposes. They're discovering more uses for marijuana that's good. And money is good. Possessions are good. There's nothing bad about them. But there can be an awful lot of bad with any one of them when we use it for our selfishness. And that includes even the Bible. You can take the Bible and the church and anything else that God gives us, and we can distort it by making it about our self-centeredness. And as we do that in a wide variety of parts of life, we tend to, what I like to call, and other people call it my word, but I like the word, we compartmentalize our lives. What does that mean? We divide our life into little compartments, and we isolate them from each other. Got our family, got our sexuality, got our money, our politics, our religion, our business, all these different parts of life. And we compartmentalize them. Real common thing to do. In fact, that is one of the most typical things that we do in our sinfulness. We don't let the various aspects of life influence us. People ask me all the time, how can some of these people call themselves Catholic and they vote in favor of abortion? And I'm thinking, not only people vote for abortion politicians, but politicians who call themselves Catholic. And they vote for abortion. And a wide variety of other things. And the issue is that they too are compartmentalizing the right things. One of the most important parts of our experience of Jesus Christ is that He calls us to integrate all of these compartments. He's the one that wants to pull it all together. As we center our lives on Him, He gives us a freedom to move away from our selfishness and to open up these different aspects of life. Not only that, one of the great things about the power of His death on the cross, especially that one moment you see it in St. Luke, chapter 23, when He says, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. He's saying that prayer of forgiveness while they are nailing Him to the cross. They're dividing His clothes. They're mocking Him, giving Him a brunch cheer. They don't translate it quite that way, but that's what they're doing in the text. And they're wide variety. They're doing that to Him at the moment He says that, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. He doesn't wait until they're sorry. They do go home beating their breast after He's died. But He says that after forgiveness while they're still doing it to Him. And it's at that moment that He gives us all a freedom to admit to the bad things that we do, the selfishness, the ways that we each misuse those good things in creation. He gives us freedom to say, yeah, that is my fault. Psychology, at least it used to, in one school, psychology, used to say, no, it's your parents' fault. Society's fault. And Jerry Springer said it's nobody's fault because it's not bad to do it all. Until they start beating each other up and throwing chairs on the stage. I'll never forget, I'd never seen a Jerry Springer show until my father was in the hospital for his violent illness. And they were watching this on TV, and I'm wondering, it wasn't the show that was interesting. I was just, why are you watching this? That was my question. And after a while of talking to people and observing and such, I realize they're watching them because they're thinking, I know I'm bad. I ain't doing that. I'm not quite that bad. That's all they're looking at. And this is, something where Christ gives us a freedom that Jerry Springer does. Matter of fact, man, if you ever see that show again, just give a little clue. That's what it's like on your first day of hell. All the people you've been sinning with are going to come out on stage one after another. And they'll be going after each other's hair, trying to gouge each other's eyes out, blaming you, yelling and screaming all the sins that you thought nobody knew about, and they're screaming on the stage, and the crowd is saying, Jerry. And they'll probably be saying, Satan, Satan. And then, that's your first day of hell, and it gets worse from there. So, and I thought that was a cool idea until somebody actually wrote an opera called Jerry Springer the Opera. And that was what it was about. It was your first Jerry Springer going to Satan on your first day of hell. I said, I should have patent on that. But one of the great things that Christ does is He gives us freedom to own up to our own responsibility without blaming society and everybody else. And say, yeah, this is what I did, I'm responsible. That's part of the process of integrating the compartments of your life. To integrate the self-centeredness, the misuse of God's good creation and His good gift, and say, this is I who did this, it's my responsibility, and I'm sorry, and I need repentance. And then we can start opening up the closed doors between the compartments of life and let them influence each other because they're centered on Christ. And just to think about it, if you've ever been on a ship, you notice that the ships are composed of compartments. When a ship is floating along and sailing through the ocean, all those passageways on the compartments are wide open. That's having the compartments wide open is a sign of health and security. They only shut them when the ship is about to sink to prevent more water going into the compartments, leave some air in it. And when we see the compartments of our life isolated from God and isolated from each other, that's a good sign that our ship is sinking too. And that we need Christ to repair whatever breaches there are and help us to learn to open up the doors. This means that what Christ does as we put Him at the center of our lives, as we ask Him to be the King of our hearts, to ask Him to be our Lord and God, that He will integrate all of these compartments of life so that our religion does feed our politics and our business. The goodness and virtue that we learn in our Catholic faith, we bring to our business practices. And we bring to the way we vote. And we bring to all the ways we vote. And that we put Jesus Christ ahead of any political affiliation, because all politicians have to be subject to Him too. And the political theories have to be subject to Him. Everything. And we do it for the sake of His glory and the good of His people. That's integrity. And that's what we are supposed to bring. This is a great gift. And, that kind of integrity is going to need constant change. Our lives change. The new issues, the issues that we have to integrate when we're young are very different than as we get older. That's just That's just true. And that's okay, so that our relationship with Jesus Christ is not going to be, well, I got myself in, my sins are forgiven, I got my relationship with Jesus, I made my act of faith, and I'm done. No, you're not done. You're not done until you die. All through life, I love the image that the prophets Jeremiah and Isaiah used in the Old Testament. That God is a potter and we are clay. Now, for sure, we're the clay. And clay can keep on being molded and shaped all through life. And the question is always going to be, change images from the compartments to the clay. With clay, you can either try to shape yourself, as we talked about this morning. You try to express yourself and shape yourself, I guarantee you it's something ugly. If the other option is to let the culture shape you, I guarantee you that if the culture shapes you, they will do so for their own selfish purposes, not for your good. Politicians will try to shape you for your vote, your money, and your influence. Hollywood will try to shape you so that you pay them money to watch their movies. And business will shape you so that you are a customer. And if you believe all the stuff in the commercials, and if you pay attention to the commercials, that's something I've noticed in the last couple of years. The theme from the Madison Avenue people that make your advertising is, our product is, quote, a life changer. Think back, watch commercials. Watch how many times they're saying it's a life changer. They want to change you to fit the needs of selling their product. They don't care about you any more than the politicians care about you. Or a lot of other people. The culture will try to mold you for their own goals, not yours, and certainly not for God's. Keep that clearly in mind. Businesses are making all kinds of moral decisions that have nothing to do with God or your concern. Third option is you can let Satan shape you, and he will make you into something hideous. He will make you inherently horrific. As a matter of fact, the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 3, says that you will become an everlasting nightmare. You won't have nightmares. You will be a nightmare if you let Satan shape you. And my go-to definition of Satan and his works comes from Jesus our Lord in John chapter 8. Where he said, Satan is a liar, the father of lies, and a murderer from the beginning. That those who see death as the solution to the problems of the world are on Satan's side. So, you take a look at a lot of our politicians. How do they define mercy? By mercy killing. We think you're suffering too much, we'll kill you. Actually, that's not why they don't care about you suffering. Guarantee you they don't. What they care about is that they promise health care for everybody. And your first year of life is your second most expensive year. Remember what Nancy Pelosi said in the interview about the health care bill back in 2000 I guess it was 2010. She was on George Stephanopoulos' show. And she said, we have to have abortion and birth control. Think of all the money we will save. So we'll kill your children and save money so that our health care bill can continue to work for the ones that we don't kill. And I said then, when I heard that, because I take things and I follow the logic. Satan is not illogical. There is a logic to what they do. You just got to understand the premises and then see where it's going. And when I heard her say that, I said, watch. Since the first year of life is your second most expensive year, medically speaking, the most expensive year is your last year. And I said, mark my words, the next step will be to encourage people to die in their last year. That they will try to do mercy. And already 17 states have right to die law, which means we want to kill you. And I got a call from Maine last week where they said, well, the option they give old people, of which I am becoming one, I told myself when I was 40 that I was going to stay middle-aged till I'm 70. And then I'll renegotiate. Well, this is my last week to do the renegotiation. But the thing that they say to old people in Maine is, well, we can give you food and water, or we can make you comfortable. No, sugar, what you're saying is, we can give you food and water, or we will kill you. Say what you mean, but being liars like Satan and murderers from the beginning, they want to kill. This is the way it is. That is what you would expect. And we can see it, I mentioned before the death rate in the 20th century. The communists, their solution to make sure communism worked was to kill 61.9 million of their own citizens in the Soviet Union. That's how they could feed people, stop starvation. They killed 61.9 million, their own government. China, 75 million. Though they think that that's a low figure. It could be as high as 200 million. We don't know for sure yet. That's what they'll do. And if we let Satan form us, we will go right along with that. That's the hideous nightmare that Hitler and others did. Or the last option is to let God form the clay. And if God does, what's his goal? You see it in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, and it's repeated in Ephesians 4, what Jesus is doing. God wants to make us in his image and likeness. That's God's goal. Satan will give you lies and murder. The world will try to form you to be used, to use you. You'll make yourself your own goofy little thing. But God will make us in his image and likeness. That's another way to see what integrity looks like. He integrates all these compartments so that we look like him. That we have aspects of God and his way of being in the way we act. And this is what we want to bring to the prison, what God is doing with us. That's our primary gift. Now, in that, I'd like to point out a couple aspects about the reality of people you find find in prison. I look at most of them and many others who are not in prison. They haven't done any of those crimes to be put in prison. But I look at the inmates and many people suffering similar problems as the primary casualties of the 1960s sexual and drug revolutions. In the late 1960s, we went through a drug and sexual revolution. By far, the more devastating was the sexual revolution. Far more devastating than the drug. The drug, and here, there's a few others who remember the 60s as people that were there, and were teens and college students like I was, and such. And we were told, and sometimes we repeated, especially during the Vietnam War, which was a terrible, terrible situation. They said, well, make love, not war. And they would make posters of rhinoceros breeding. That seemed to miss the mark to me, but at least any goal that I had in my life. And so, but at any rate, they promoted that the opposite of being in favor of war was being in favor of open sex. And I don't need a piece of paper from City Hall to show that I love somebody. That was part of the ideology. And a Catholic subset of that came in '68 after Humanae Vitae came out. And a lot of Catholics were saying, I don't want the Pope in my bedroom. To which I learned to respond, you flatter yourself. I don't think he wants to be there either. But what he wants is for God to be Lord of your bedroom. That's what the Pope was talking about. And the ways that everybody put him down, because he gave these dire warnings in July of 1968 about what's going to happen with birth control and such. And people, and I remember thinking, well, I agree with him on this birth control thing, but I think he may have overstated it. No, he was spot on, warning that there would be an increase in same-sex activity and promotion of the same-sex culture, more adultery, more fornication, and abortion. I didn't see the connection, but in fact, he was 100% right. You can trace the sales, the interesting charts from the Center for Disease Control. They trace the sales of the condoms and other devices from the time that it was made available. It was still in the middle of testing in the 60s. The pill was under medical testing in the 60s. And then by 1970-71, it was put on the market. And they traced the sales of the pill and condoms. And the curve is a high value curve. What's interesting is that they show other charts that the increase of abortion in that period follows exactly the same curve. The increase of out-of-wedlock birth follows the same curve. Exactly. And the increase of sexually transmitted diseases follows the same curve exactly. In other words, the more that people use condoms and the pill and other devices, the more out-of-wedlock births, the greater number of abortions, and the greater spread of sexually transmitted diseases. Now, I learned this actually from a doctor, medical doctor. I hadn't looked for that, but he pointed it out. And he said this is completely counterintuitive. But the reality is this. People were told that this is now safe sex. And so they took more risky behaviors. They became more risky. Again, when I was a kid, there were 2 STDs, syphilis and gonorrhea. That was about it. And there was, and it was really serious, the possibility of eliminating both because of penicillin. That was, the doctors were talking about that, like the way that we almost effectively eliminated polio with the soft vaccine. They were looking to say that we can eliminate syphilis and gonorrhea by 1975. But what has happened instead with the sexual revolution is that now we have increased the number of sexually transmitted diseases to 75. 20% of the heterosexual adult population is infected, 25% of teenagers, and in the homosexual community, it is virtually 100%. So much so that their life expectancy is now 47, as opposed to 79 for the average male. And lesbians are homosexual men are 46, lesbians are 47. Average for males is 79, and for women 80. That's a big gap. The sexual revolution is deadly. But here's the other thing. When I was born in 1949, the rate of out-of-wedlock birth was 4% nationwide. And by 1960, it had gone up to 5%. But then from 1960 to the present, it's gone from 5% till today. It is 52% of all children in our society are born to unmarried parents. Think of that. That's over half. It is more catastrophic for the African American community, where it is 78% of all children are born to unmarried parents. And the Hispanic community is moving up from about 54% to getting closer to 60%, going up in the last 10 years. And Caucasian community has gone up from about 29 to over 30% now. Now, why did I bring that up in terms of the folks in prison being casualties of this? 80% of all inmates are the children of unmarried parents. 80%. It's 80% of the black guys, 80% of the Hispanic guys, 80% of the white guys. And I think we have to pay attention to the reality that the higher rates of out-of-wedlock birth among blacks and Hispanics is part of what accounts for the larger number of blacks and Hispanics being incarcerated. Being born to unmarried parents is the number one indicator that the children will be poor. Not race, but the marital status of the parents is the number one factor. Number one factor in them not finishing high school. Number one factor in them becoming unmarried parents themselves. Number one factor in them becoming drug users and abusers. And number one factor in incarceration. And that's not only in the United States. I was speaking with a German prison chaplain were pulled up in Germany. And he said that, I was talking about our experience here. He said, oh, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same, no difference. That breakdown of family that is the result of the sexual revolution is devastating. And just sometimes you'll hear, well, the African American community has this high rate of out-of-wedlock birth because of their traditional slavery. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Because in the 1910 census, African Americans had a lower rate of out-of-wedlock birth than did Caucasians. 1910 is only 55 years after slavery. And the factor was the black church community. The people of faith made a difference. The preaching from the pulpit of the importance of family and the responsibility of your relationship between men and women. That was the factor that prevented it. The factor that led to the rapid increase from 4% in the 40s was that after the war, the World War that is, in the 1950s, blacks lost their jobs in the factories up north. The federal government came in with federal housing. If a man abandoned his family, and they would give aid to dependent children, it became a way by the federal government. It was unintentional. They didn't mean to cause this, but it became a disincentive to marry. If you get money and housing, if there is no man in the house. And from that point on, the black rate of out-of-wedlock birth went from about 4% in the 30s and 40s, early 40s, to 16%. Everybody else was 5%. There was 16% in 1960. With the war on poverty, it went up by 50%, 24% in 1965, and then today it's 78%. That's rapid. But the more the government helped, sort of, with the programs, the greater the breakdown of family. That was not the solution. We have to take care of our needy, for sure, but we also have to incentivize marriage and family stability. And dads being there so that when a boy gets bigger than his mother, there's a man around the house to let him know that he can't push his mother around. Boys need that. Girls need to know that their daddy's princess, and that he loves her, and cherishes her, and that she needs to find a man that is worthy of her. And not any man that comes along because she's desperate or fearful or whatever it might be. Or worse, even raped and forced. Takes a dad to be there for that. And we are coming into a situation where the young men and women, the majority of them, are coming from that kind of background. Again, we have to keep in mind what we bring to bear mostly is Jesus Christ. What He's done for us, how He's transformed us, how He has integrated us, and our story of that integration. But then there are two other things that follow from it. One, I see it when I've been in, the few times I've been in the prisons with the men. You see how the inmates, the guys there, gravitate to the fact that these guys love us. So many who did not know the love of a dad, they find that these guys don't want anything from me. They just love me. And they want what's best for me. They want me to have Jesus Christ. And they care about me, and they'll help me to learn how to integrate my life. These guys who are far along the way in integrating integrating their life, they help me integrate my life. And not because you're going to get anything from it. They do it the way a dad does. I'm convinced that it's one of those beautiful things to see when a man, I think, comes to the moment of real maturity in his life, with a deciding point of maturity. Not so much when he gets married. That's a mature decision and all that, that's good. But where men really change is when they hold their baby. That, when you know, that baby needs me. And I got to be there. And I'm not going to get anything out. I'm going to get wet and covered with who knows what. And I'm going to get every sickness this kid brings in my house. But I love him. And that moment is when a man comes to a decision to turn away from his self, his ego, and self-centeredness, to love somebody else, just to love them. And as men who've gone through that and stayed with their children and raised them, come into the prisons, they bring that gift. That is part of again, the gospel has to be primary, but you bring that integrity that you learn from Jesus into that relationship with the various folks. And women go through their own experiences. You know, of course, it's a bit foreign to my experience, not being a woman and not being married. So I have to observe it from a distance. But you go through your own experiences, and you'll be bringing the same thing to the women's prisons or any other place you bring. They miss that. They miss that. And it's not that we're going in there to be these little baby Sigmund Freuds fixing all the psychological. I don't do that. But just be normal people who use the transformation that Christ has effected within us, and we pass that on. That is no small factor. On the other hand, I also would say this. This is a great thing to do in the prisons and jails. It needs to be done. It's fantastic. But then we can also encourage the folks throughout the church who are not going to the prison, but can still do a lot of this because the inmates in prison, convicted men and women, are experiencing the extremities of this, the worst forms of the catastrophe of the sexual revolution and the drug revolution, which again affects most inmates. You know that there is an even bigger group outside of prison who have the same factors. They just haven't committed crime. Because again, it says 80% of the convicted who are the children of unmarried parents. But that doesn't mean that 80% of all those unmarried people, or children of unmarried people, go to prison by any means. There's a much, much bigger group outside of prison, and they need fathers, mothers, and substitute aunts and uncles of their parents, and usually their mothers who are at home, but sometimes it's their grandparents, sometimes their own mothers cannot take care of them because they're on drugs or substance for whatever reason. And we have to encourage our brothers and sisters in our parishes at home who have greater conversion that they too need. There's a lot of folks outside of prison who need that kind of mothering, fathering, caring family with the goal of helping them to become family. In verse this, I fear too many of our politicians are, trying to encourage sexual misbehavior and irresponsibility, and they're encouraging drug use by legalizing marijuana. And I'm not saying that you've got to arrest every marijuana user. We can see through that, but to legalize it brings catastrophic effects. Go check Colorado. Check it out and see what devastating effects there are. As a matter of fact, it strikes me as so weird. I still see all these anti-cigarette smoking and anti-vape and all that stuff. But now they're legalizing marijuana. And not only does it mean catastrophe, ask questions. Who owns the marijuana stores? And which politicians do they give to? Check that out. I already read the names of the big billionaires. Check that out. See what I mean? These people aren't doing it for our good. We have to be folks who go into the culture as a variety of culture leaders bring disintegration to our culture. They bring disintegration. And our goal is to let Christ bring integration in our lives, so we can bring it to others. Inside the prisons and outside. Big task. Big task, I know. I ain't scared. I live in the great state of Alabama. We ain't scared there either. And we've got to remember, the church was a tiny community. When the Roman Empire fell, it was the church that saved what was good from the Roman culture. We preserved it. All the copy, remember that oldest copy of Caesar's Gallic Wars or the Aeneid in the Vatican? The church preserved those books. The monks and nuns preserved them. They passed them on. And they started these schools. And converted the barbarians, our ancestors. And this is what we have to say. They did it then, we can do it again. That's our job. Amen? Amen.